Hello, dear Americans, and dear Xi Jinping, especially differentially. We are in a semi-ancient trap. I would address Vladimir Putin and Mr. Zelensky, but in other words, A through Z, we have been systems tactically ulterior than the human species body of individual bodies. And where, for example, how other species bodies have group differences like male and female, and humanity has it, nature's identity is showing us that it is generating that. And it is showing us answers here and questions. But those answers and questions are replaced here and there with our founders' words because there is a breaching method to observe. But to observe it is where and how I'll have collusion slash S, even with black pupils, whites of eyes, self-value collusion, you slash S. People will speak about truth, but then if someone tries to use how we have black people's whites of eyes, and someone's going to say, oh, well, this is what the research says. Our founders declassified not to use the records the way they have been used. Our founders declassified the databases. They had slavery rules only permitted northern colonies and southern colonies. And it wasn't just one country that was rolls with that. And they had their own torture, extortion, physical slavery over themselves. Therefore, syntactical slavery over themselves. Therefore, physical, because we are and have been users of our names through and as systems tactical ulterior from the one that nature showed the ancients. And then a breaching method forced trick persuaded people to blame other things, others, ourselves for what it caused. A breaching method is also a scientific value that nature shows us that all those multi-front attacks on differences like women, not just as colonies, there was slavery left entrenched, northern colonies and southern colonies per a breaching method. And our founders communicated about this, but other is just because it's published. And then it's backed by the schools and the people attacking them. Because there is a hyper foreign at countries A through Z. And that generates nature's demonstration slash S of it. And the breaching method knew it would. And that would even make it its own self discernible more. Nature shows us that one of those things, that all those different laws against natives, against the native population of humanity, had been against them too already. It already had the ground tactically denatured. Nature shows us the more probable that the ancients cultivated. They were taught by nature itself how to cause positive, what's going to cause positive value nature, progressions, acts in nature. Not making mercury and all the fish in the ocean. Even the ocean is polluted because humanity has been systems tactically ulterior and self-value collusion slash S or sensed. Even any grouping of countries, while they are locations, areas, and states, let alone together as a grouping of countries, they're going to need an individual leader to be voiced. All exceptions are going to have demonstration slash S too. Locations, areas, and states are criminally foreign influence slash hyper criminally foreign influence. So to speak, I'm not even a lawyer. Originally and still, we could discern how lawyers were kept criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw from off their campuses, from off their homes if they were homeschooled. This breaching method is a use of location slash S collusion that nobody wanted. Just like you don't want collusions replacing what nature communicates with black people's whites of eyes. But you know, if someone tries to use that as properly, with syntax alone regarding, they have readings of statutes that give people at the last second the benefit of the doubt based on their title, what type of education they had, etc. Wethersfield police and their lawyers, retired police chiefs and their lawyers, and their intimate ties and families, and a lawyer of the FBI director, Robert Luskin. He was directed not to go to that case in 2006, a district court case in Connecticut, without a lawyer, by a Judge Nations or a Judge Winter. But his co-defendants and him and their lawyer and the neighbors of his co-defendants, like Eric Jensen, is also one of the ones involved with his girlfriend, with her neighbors, a former Mayor Gold, who's increasingly involved with people with medical corruption with the agencies, state police, FBI, multiple police departments, and people with campuses, and increasingly people who were in other classrooms when I was growing up, who are putting fake things in databases. With mayors and other natures of politicians, everyone's a certain, and presidents are lied to. There's a certain type of chaos, and whenever this breaching method employed, we're supposed to understand what witch trials are about, using what we have and had to classify. We're supposed to understand clearer than day that our founders directed us to understand why the plural founders, they told us to only refer to them as James Madison. We don't know the name of any other founder because they knew that they were doing with it. They would have self-value rules, even the best of them, even the presidents / chiefs, they missed it. Even Judge Napolitano, YouTube channel Judging Freedom, and the other judges, retired and standing. They missed this, but it's recorded. It's known, quote, known. Our founders only had security they directed us to understand only to refer to James Madison as our founder. They directed us to understand why and how nobody had free speech and why everyone had to pretend other. And though that body was incensed. And it was adapted to. You have people speaking about laws when they have witch trials and roles with the breaching method that was through other countries. Not even regardless, they were different. Oh, this colony was owned by this country. They both had roles with that same sickly distinctly, but sickly not distinctly with slavery, even northern colonies, southern colonies. That same breaching method against women's rights. That same breaching method against the syntactical value of native, of humanity. We haven't had one proper humanity treatment, otherwise we would not have had left out how the databases were criminally foreign influenced. How the hyper additional roles, even though no one wanted that, they would pretend other. And or they would pretend this for they were blaming on other things, others, or they're on themselves for different motives, even real motives, more and more propagated by the breaching method itself, cultivated, right? Where they won't, because this breaching method has people's short words changed if they speak about predicate acts with facts. And that's one of the things we're speaking about here. Where the people that were not the law or the interbranch or the intelligence, they forced it, replacing what nature communicates with black people's whites of eyes when nature is not only itself as criminal insidiousness nature. And our founders communicated for us to understand this. And who would debate that does and will have inherent to, active to, and progressive to, increasingly. Their logic, their nature of logic, their fact treatments, their premises treatments, their sequence values, demonstration / S of the same. See, this breaching method showed that the roles with the names of the people, the sciences, and the counters to them. It shows the names of the people of location / S, everywhere the human species body is. They have to hide where they pretend, and pretended to be integrity through an systems tactical ulterior from the one that is a different identity of simultaneous nature, where and how it is generating individual different individual species bodies, each one made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies, all group difference slash S, like male, female. We are showing it with other species bodies. It is being generated by that which is neither us nor them, but it is all things anyway. To an extent, we could discern the body of nature itself and its system and its words abridged. Part of the reason it's gotten away with, where and how these individual types of rights, affronts, is relative to where and how before modern countries and right through, just like we could discern, so we have this pretended debatable and people missing it. But if we pay attention, step back, what our founders communicated, there was a breaching method entrenched through their lifetimes. They did not have free speech. That's one of the reasons they had to have James Madison had to have declassified. He has the best speech for us, like Marbury versus Madison. Real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice. This is what I learned. Is the definition of it. I'm not a lawyer. Lawyers, too, I recorded them how kept criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought. Way worse roles than with just cruel and unjust punishment, collusion slash with all natures of crime scenes. And with forcing blame on selves, like, in other words, other things, others, or selves. Collusion slash, that's that everyone has. Forgiveness is so we allow someone to tell on the breaching method. You guys are forcing us to blame it on you guys. And that's recorded. You won't allow me to have short words about how the WFSB, CBS, and other networks and the intelligence next to them, they have and have had collusion slash S interstates and with the court next to and names at the World Trade Center and the night before it with spots next to the World Trade Center. And they post-dated legal papers and showed that to the panel of judges at the Ninth Circuit Court the morning of the World Trade Center attack, right before it. The same ones involved insidiously with a name. People named Scalora, who have collusions with people that were next to each of the campuses I went. There's a house on Valley Crest Street with the name DeMorrow that is further involved with the FBI, with sexual and medical offenders of kids and multiple courts and their family members. These are victims advocates, also collusion slash S with them, with home break-ins, and with Wethersfield police chiefs retired, their families' intimate ties, and detectives. A guy who said he was the partner. I never had a personal word at all conversation with either of the two speech class teachers I had in high school. And one of them had me stay back. She has collusions with behind my back, planting evidences, cover up what I caught them doing before that. And they're also confessing now, verbally, non-verbally, all along Route 175 from the founding locations and conjunctions to it and to that. Our people on off the state corrections offices and off the state judicial branch offices involved with predicate acts and a method slash S of them. But this is also manifest at countries A through Z at the same exact time. It's relative how we have suburbs that were designed by a torture, extortion, slavery method, and things that are gotten away with pretended to be debatable, and the only way they got away with it, if we pay attention, is by self-valuing other things, others, or selves, having been blamed for things our founders told us to blame on the breaching method through James Madison, and by telling us to understand why and how he's the only name that a true American and our properly educated American is going to refer to as the founder, as one of the known founders. The other founders were counter. James Madison's plan, they forced them to take part with the Constitutional Convention. And the breaching method forced them to an extent they had to stay self-value collusion /S with the internationally monitored conversations, the difference of their guilt, overt criminal enterprises, private ones. Roles having reacted, to the resulting. Increasingly, nature is demonstrating to us the whole ocean's polluted. If there's mercury in the fish, there is way worse than that. There are even long-lived isotopic particles, which God knows what that is. That was reported by CNN or Fox News. With the Fukushima, where even the ocean took out a power plant. Countries A through Z, this is the dream. I believe it's Navajo traditional teachings. I can't find it. I looked up when I tried to look up on YouTube. A Native American leader said that. So at least some Native Americans believe that we must read each other's dreams. And if I look at the dreams of countries A through Z, it's like the parts of a body. It's not like a family. The parts of a body, the human species body, a unity generated by nature itself to teach us how to have syntax for unity. And one independent from the other species bodies. And it made up of a whole bunch of independent bodies that are simultaneously unified. But by its system, and we could ignore that system, but it demonstrates the second when we were, it keeps demonstrating it. Where we are, and the moment we will be using abridged systems, nature shows us we're going to be using abridged constitution. But we had the Constitution taught to us wrong. Even the best of them. Even Judge Napolitano's Judging Freedom YouTube channel. He made the mistake of referring to our founders as anyone but James Madison. Or the unknown founders we're supposed to refer to them to. This is recorded somewhere. They took my book, too, people involved with the World Trade Center attack. They have roles with former director of the F.B.I, Robert Luskin, with leaders of the kids and the kids of the leaders of the kids. And with use of I'm not a doctor, but I also recorded doctors involved with wire mail crime acts and methods, and with child abusers, leaders of kids, years apart, first forced, where their families have roles, with triages interstates, and they've been putting fake transcripts in there, and they have personally and professionally roles with multiple courts, family members. The whole family's going at the same time with a whole bunch of other countries. These are not legitimate roles with differences, the names of the people, the sciences. At countries A through Z, we have been systems tactical ulterior from that one generating differences. It's showing us that it generates all differences, difference /S, or we are using systems, even showing, if we were using systems abridged. And we have had black people's rights of eyes to discern this. And the nature of debate, like regarding, there's a colonel who is not himself famous. I don't even remember his name. And most Americans don't. But most Americans at the same time, they do remember. There are proofs that they remember, don't shoot until you see the whites of eyes. Even if we don't, in other words, all the records, no one had free speech. When people say our founders owned slaves, that's one of the reasons we're supposed to never refer to our founders, plural, as a known person unless we were speaking about James Madison. In other words, and we were not supposed to entertain campuses describing how people voted on slavery. There was a breaching method that was forcing them, North and South, not to speak about a whole bunch of different things that no one wanted collusion /S with at the same time. but everyone had only known that forced. We're supposed to have free speech now to force that quality of fact should be nature that does not leave out how we have black people's whites of eyes. And James Madison had everyone counter-extorted. James Madison's plan is the only correct answer. There have been self-value collusion /S, replacing it. It wasn't a T-tax that caused the American Revolution. Those were narratives that were orchestrated, had to be fixed, pretended, timed. Otherwise, they would have been hurt by the breaching method /S, the overt criminal enterprise involved, the private ones, the terrorists. At the same time, with the witch trials, courts, all that, they had to hide from layers of things to keep the breaching method discerned. Nature itself is showing us a human fact should be nature breaching method is one of all, even though those, these type of rights, these people hurt, these type of rights, women hurt, black people's whites, lives, communications change. These are all equally about in value as a human fact should be nature breaching method that is maintained and through the World Trade Center attack effectively. These are not legitimate use /S of the words radical and of extremism. These are families. There are only 3 branches of government here and there where they measure the world unfolding over this is the logistical. There are not that many nations with nuclear weapons. And it is really only the big ones. Russia, America, and China, and India, and Africa censored. And in other words, and we can make a species body plan. And I'll donate it and we'll call it pantheism. And it is more probable and it is more practical that, for example, yin yang went with pantheism. A part of exceptions where it was a part of a different system, but they also were that same system because either one is about the invisible but still discernible, including the name of a god. But with science, there have to be an exception. We have to agree to use a name or not, or to use all of them, which is where the plural part of pantheism, not about many gods, but about that one name, but about a name for that one identity of value progression that is generating all group differences, like male and female. And so yin yang was revealed to teach this. Also, proof /S of it is if anyone tries to deny it, that will have inherent to, active to, and progressive to. Their logic demonstration /S of the same. But we could say this about logic, and we could observe this about logic and logic's nature that pretends that they can't discern how we have black people's whites of eyes. Means to discern since we were kids. Even if we didn't have the best education, no matter where we were. Little kids in Hartford, Connecticut, let alone New York City. People know that the suburbs were designed to force people to a value nature system to overcome negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. While nature is demonstrating the breaching method involved, it's also demonstrating a negative identity of grounds, identity of relationship to itself, hyper additionally, and as ourself, /S, as the humanity body, /bodies. We are in a semi-ancient trap that forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded. The only people that could operate the phenomenon of names, see, the ancients appreciated how nature is showing us there is only one way slash S that we could operate the human species unity body, even if we can't, no matter as an individual, and grouped all group differences. These are things for correlation slash hypercorrelation. English and the ancient languages together. They revealed, before the sciences became criminally foreign influenced slash hyper criminally foreign influenced, no one could fathom how anyone could will, or let alone get away with, forcing, tricking, hurting, persuading, making the entire species body not remember how nature shows us how to cause positive value nature progressions, acts and natures, but per its definition of it, and per its appreciation of as all exceptions in exception nature, and in a way we could discern when there are fake exceptions. But see, this preaching method showed the names of the people, the sciences, and names of people A through differences A through Z, not just the names of the people, the sciences. But this involved where there's every nature of debate still contained originally what our founders communicated for us to understand. It contained quality aspects in nature itself that, if not entertained, that body was sensed by any one of a part of a whole list of things and people and interests that simultaneously, without any of them or that realizing, they were also sensing for the breaching method, that which had even slavery, northern colonies and southern colonies entrenched, even though no one wants that. And no one wanted that. And where and how there are the parents of other. It is recorded they can't afford to have discerned their logic pretending that they believe that people wanted it for those motivations. And they have relative delusions. And they are recorded being and haven't been used remotely as fact treatments and as fact treatment nature, and as names difference treatments, as a certain type of victim slash hyper victim. Speaking for the law, countries A through Z. As types of jobs, they want to use their, I know about the 433 rep, and how could you, Anthony, how could you know about that? You don't even know about what in other words, forget about it. This is what it's about. I'm an expert on the nature of English grammar because I'm an expert on the nature of relativity slash hyperrelativity, generating all things. Little kids, remember, were experts on this. But a breaching method from off all ages and natures of campuses. It made and keeps hyper additional collusion slash S that no one wanted and that no one wants. And where and how there are exceptions, even ones self-cultivated, a breaching method maintains that motivated. It increasingly stays that no one wants collusions. But increasingly stays everyone forces, tricks, hurts, and persuades. The same entertain subject treatments, leaving out exceptions and faking them, pretending not to realize them, and while tactically delusions raw. The experts on psychiatry, I'm not even a doctor. That whole field, the fields of the sciences, they have recorded how they're kept, used criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, and shown needs and means to hide it there. Other places are in the difference to exploit roles with the difference too. A hyperforeign breaching method knew that nature would be demonstrating itself to us And so it employed a whole bunch of natures of names of peoples of sciences, industries tied to them. Overt criminal enterprise, private ones, terrorists. Everyone was already a puppet of the hyperforeign before this syntactically, otherwise that body was sensed. This is what our founders communicated, left declassified for us to defend, to liberate, to then defend. We have our campuses, databases, and the sense and sensibilities with people with opinions tied to it being screened by offensive collusion /S. You wouldn't fathom, like people named O'Neill, involved with West Hartford campuses, and with Whiting forensics, and with a principal upskirt nature, involved with families that forced that with them. I don't know them at all. These are interbranch of foreign intelligence with all the countries in the news and where and how they are manifest. Then I see you could have learned a lot from YouTube shorts on countries and things like that. But only properly if you understand, since before religious messengers were born, or the whole time that those databases were criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence. Even if that's not true, first proof of it is that it's more probable than other things that have been convicted and are being convicted. It's theorized too. The difference of it is being exploited. Where and how there are roles recorded replacing what our founders communicated. Self-valuing why and how they could even get away with that. Why and how really it's obfuscated and there are self-valued roles as collusion /S. Worse than obfuscating, replacing what our founders communicated. We're supposed to understand why and how James Madison is the only individual founder that we're directed to say that we know the name of individually. And this is relative to how, in other words, and the prisons have collusions personally and professionally through campuses, but again, from off them, in a way /S the breaching method knew they would. The breaching method had remote use /S of the sense and sensibilities of the people, the types of departments, relative to its needs to hide. Its use /S of the difference of collusions. Collusion /S use /S roles. Collusions. Because this breaching method makes all and maintain collusion. That's one of the things that all those roles were. That when we pay attention what's actually recorded about American history, there was a singular collusion, like that which had sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly, even slavery entrenched. That which is really behind. See, there's positive and negative behind the suits and ties, the counter and an exception. I don't know if that must be one of the things. I know yin is female and yang is male with yin yang. But one side must be positive and one side must be negative. And it's not just relative to it. This is relative to the hypervolume science of that which is generating totally different individual species bodies of individual bodies. And all group differences, the way it generates it, or it demonstrates we're using systems other than its own, generating and has all differences. But also positive onto itself, or our special difference as Earth through us is forced away from here, as forced space nature transfer, as its identity of as a negative identity of relationship to itself that nature has, as every body has a relativity positive and negative simultaneously in demonstration of this, and in demonstration slash S. There are parts of the rest of the complete nature of nature that are inseparable from any individual part, like being an individual or an individual species, or time. See, the parts of time are parts of its body of forever nature. That one that is generating all group differences, showing us what's most probable and way more practical to theorize, let alone to convict, regarding what generated everything, what is generating everything. We are shown there is a distinct identity of simultaneous nature. It is also a distinct identity of hyper invisible but still discernible as the body of why and how. We need to appreciate more than one word for a verb. For example, the parts of speech are about the invisible but still discernible. But they come also with the means to discern the body of the hyper invisible but still discernible. Why and how there are two. There are only two participle natures, the present participle and the past participle. I refer to them as natures because everything is the body of nature. And we could ignore its system also positive onto itself. But it will continue to demonstrate that we are using systems, even if countries A through Z agree. Here in ye, we this all along. We hunger and thirst not so we could play these economic games. Who trains? In other words, we could show them, force them how to read the law, the way nature itself will lead us, because it is functional. Nature shows us how it is functional, how it is a distinct body of hyper invisible but still discernible. That is hyperconjunctive too, where there is the invisible but still discernible. The subjects. We could only appreciate subjects individually grouped and simultaneously to an extent, /S. And we can discern with that too. There is that identity of itself as nature itself that is too finite. It is the order of the finite. It is that which is beyond us, grouped ways. And it is what is greater than all things simultaneous that we can perceive or even fathom. In other words, as the hyper simultaneous too. It shows us that the parts of the rest of its complete nature stay inseparable from any individual thing, even anything made up like art. It is inseparable from and while as the order of the finite with that art, distinctly from how it is the grouped and or active, distinctly from how it is a progressive value. /S. It has all things while not but any way. In many pray, boxings. And so boxings but makes us shush to hear what makes no sound, but shush, but preferring the shush sound, while martial arts only semi-prefer the shush sound, and wrestling does not prefer the shush sound. And wrestling, martial arts, and boxing are about fighting, but by the rules. But the rules have been abridged since some ancient times, while used remotely pretending other, while needing to self-value collusion /essay each age and nature of campus and or homeschool. Per collusion /S with the breaching methods use of the syntax, therefore the syntax nature too, at location /S. /locations, A through Z, everywhere the human species body has a body standing. This is why and is how. The suburbs look almost exactly alike from America to Russia to Ukraine. This is why and is how. When Mr. Putin was trying to explain, when Mr. Putin was trying to explain to Tucker Carlson which Tucker Carlson, I'm not knocking Tucker Carlson. Every campus A through Z, sickly distinctly, was hurt by this. Two of my neighbors from Wethersfield and one's from New Britain recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they were people involved with former director of the F.B.I. Robert Luskin in all these different countries who had collusion/S with the World Trade Center attack through their collusion/S with use of databases and use of location/S in a way that, in other words, is on a mass scale. Everyone's hiding their actual motivations. Because, in other words, it's recorded. The breaching method knows how it used and uses all ages and natures of investigations, investigators, of politicians, each age and nature of their family member, self-value use/S collusion of criminally foreign influence, fact, human nature, quality aspects of nature, and or relative to where and how, as everyone has means to discern, people are sensed when they try to adapt. Like, for example, how no one appreciated why and how we have black people's rights of rights. And our founders communicated for us to blame this on the breaching method. But you have our founders blamed and framed. They communicated not to have themselves represented as anyone else besides James Madison and or Chief, that which is also tied to nature itself, demonstrating to us James Madison's plan would not have worked to the extent it did. Had the Native Americans, they enabled it, whether consciously or not. We don't know. We know which ones were consciously, or if any were consciously. There are proof that they had to be consciously part of that plan. But we don't know which names of them. And even if they weren't consciously part of the plan, James Madison, which they had to be, because they had to counter store at key locations inside of more than 13 colonies. And there had already been roles, northern colonies, so that's why they had to leave slavery entrenched. They still had to hide their roles because everyone was still measured and maintained by layers of other, formally, informally, and the differences of guilt there that was also already hid behind to keep the people of the past self-valuing that, people act valuing that in the past too, to keep everyone locked too. In the future, where they can be shown they need to self-value again, do that too. It's relative to why and how really. No, we don't have clearer than day. Nature itself is directing us to have these phrases inseparable from proper teachings of American history, of every other country's history. They were criminally foreign influence databases. Everyone should be in agreement of that. Otherwise, they should be demonstrated to how they're missing things that are actually recorded. And there's an identity of relativity / hyperrelativity. Species body, for example, is relativity. But that which is generating totally different species bodies so we can discern its own is hyperrelativity. In other words, relativity, the theory of relativity is and has been used offensively to sense for a breaching method that has self-value collusions at countries individually grouped in together. Repentance, this way. Blame the breaching method. Or if someone's going to leave out the breaching method with blame, it's discernible they got it and get it wrong. They have had collusion. There are whole predicate acts methods leveraged consciously, natures of men and women and of other kids against themselves. In New York City, clearer than day. The same way, non-distinctly from the kids of the suburbs in Connecticut and in the cities of Connecticut, but it's simply not distinctly too. And even though we're non-distinctly victims of the same thing, and people throughout the country want to help the people, in other words, but nature's way, We don't want to help through these systems that get sucked in. Oh, but then we have to be, in other words, it never goes away. When you're little and you understand how and why they make mistakes with American history, the people, whoever does, in the news media or just any type of media, the arts, they haven't gotten there correctly. The breaching method, our founders left us to understand how the breaching method would keep everyone blaming things like slavery, like prejudice or racism for things that it caused, and showed everyone how to explain. When how nature was and is in demonstration / this and that. Also, with demonstrations of the breaching method, where it's relative, those explanations are used to keep out any identity of. In other words, the names of the people of the sciences jump into our conversations dishonestly and preemptively. There is no excuse to prevent people with those simple understanding. That's one of the most principal things. Everyone was counter-extorted with the Constitutional Convention, with the Declaration of Independence. And why and how is because everyone was factored nature, tortured, extorted, and enslaved. And if they tried to counter any part of it, they were sentenced before they could make any nature of unity or independence that could defend itself syntactically through its own interactions with A through Z. And they can't overcome use that remotely, individually grouped together. Forgiveness, for example, is because too grouped, those countries were tortured, extorted, and factory nature enslaved too. That's why how they never addressed this. In other words, that's why we have to force everyone to do it for them. We have to force that quality of factory nature that nature itself gives us means to. With digital, with the World Wide Web, it will reveal already recorded that already were shown the people who read the laws in America across the countries regarding the difference of what people say over the World Wide Web or in real life. They already hid how a breaching method showed them. They need to hide what's actually their value, other uses of those readings of statutes of precedent. It's not just the names of the people of the law. Psychiatry is criminally formidable and tactically delusions raw. Collusion / us replacing what our founders communicated and what nature itself does. Black pupils. These are natures of industries that are interagencies and intermilitaries. They're incapable of dealing with things like war properly. They're the only ones that have been involved with. All the ones involved with bombs and stuff in our countries, they also have roles with psychiatry, with more natures of organized crimes, and roles with collusion / us with the difference of the guilt there at those locations or other locations / us. This breaching method showed the people. This breaching method was hyper sophistication here since before our founders were born. One of the people with Hartford courts confessed that Eric Burgess will get in a lot of trouble for what he confessed, but she doesn't know the extent of it. In other words, he was forced, tricked her, and persuaded to collusions with F.B.I. Director Robert Luskin and multiple New Britain Superior Court Hartford courts, people with West Hartford locations, roads and routes, people with intelligence people, foreign and domestic, tied to an ass. I don't know if he's intelligence on, but Daryl Sullivan with Alina's Pizza on Park Street has roles with some FBI and some sexual and medical offenders of kids. Also with WTNH putting fake things on campuses, intercities, and they put fake ties to me with the O'Neill family and people that have been planting evidences at the sides of a campus with people from Korea, Russia, and Ukraine at the same time collusions with a former Mayor Gold and people with the side entrances to a park in Wethersfield who have been planting evidences in databases. And I never saw them on campuses at all, people with the name Perone. And I saw a Mike Kerr made a quick exception. I never saw a Jerry Kerr on campus. They're one of the ones involved with Officer Jerry Miller and ones with the New Britain Superior Court, with digital crimes, with the F.B.I. too, and the Wethersfield Police, with sexual medical offenders of kids, and next to religious spots, and their roles with foreign and domestic military at the spots and locations associated with them and with their families, and with these police and courts forging names and switching names, and making confessions and then running away, make it look like we had a conversation. They're refusing to get on paper since I was a kid. They use crime methods of putting a charge with no writing and making confessions tied to that, where they put multiple different police departments from different towns too for one of the arrests. Intercity, they all have to hide life aggressions relative to where and to how they recorded themselves preemptively, involved pretending not to realize roles, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, or readings of statutes and precedents, and use/s of their own differences and of other people's differences. See, but the differences of guilt, use/s, also involves a breaching method that needs that outcome/s. All these assessments of subjects, names, and differences, leaving out its roles with these things, and with the World Trade Center attack, and use/s of it recorded. Uses of words like extremism and radical are involved with predicate acts with facts, methods/s, collusion/s roles that are not just stemmed from this alone, with black people's whites of eyes, communications replaced, and our founders. So there's a Leahy family also that has roles with WFSB, CBS, with a bunch of courts personally and professionally, attaching little kids to fake ties to doctors and themselves. And as adults too, they're doing that. They're putting fake transcripts through the mail to people. And with Harvard Hospital and their campuses and people intercities, these are people all along Route 175 with conjunctions to it and to that. And retired police chiefs involved with the Leahy family, with multiple courts family members, and proven child abusers, leaders of kids, and their roles with fake ties to me. People with the judicial branch offices, corrections offices, increasingly involved with people from other areas that make confessions on my street too, tied to the people named Lombardo and Leahy. Involved also with federal criminal code, with multiple courts, judges, and their family members too, and their roles with themselves socially together too, with scams on people. A Delafair family has roles with all kinds of investigators, and natures of organized crimes. People involved with identity theft, frauds, all kinds of medical corruption, and military, foreign and domestic, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw. Like with a Fred Grisey too on Zion Street, with a former in Hartford, Connecticut, sought me out to make confessions as a stranger too, and they hid what I recorded them doing with him. And he's increasingly tied to proven child abusers, leaders, and kids, and their roles with that a school, Watkinson School, not far from Mather Street, no. All kinds of scams with foreign and domestic intelligence there, with overt criminal enterprise, private ones, even if they're doing it legitimately. With people involved, like with the police, like a Chris White. I don't know. They try to make a fake exception with him, tied to people increasingly with a Ray Reynolds and Eric Jensen, who have roles still planting evidences against me with their educators too, behind my back. My educators never told me that. I recorded other ways. And they confessed this, in other words. But with the same house, they have collusion / us with the same house, interstates, with their extended family members further involved with the child abusers years of kids, and with one outside my hotel room. Not my hotel room, the hotel building front door. I never had a word of conversation with her in my life. She's also one of the ones involved with the subby Bajerio and a subby Scalora with some untimely deaths. People involved with untimely deaths tied to them. And their roles planting evidences and identity theft, fraud, slanders on off campuses. I never saw them, either one of them, on a campus, on the inside of a campus I ever went. These are people that are all recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with the same house, involved with the Phil Cololo, further with the Whiting forensics, with a whole bunch of other people tied to the same house, and ones with the name Smith. And they're trying to start fights between making everyone speak through others. These are people all at Hartford Hospital too, involved with these houses, with drugs and medicines crimes and wire crimes there, mail crimes. They have roles with legal crimes, all kinds of rackets there. Their roles with the people with Yukon through time, with the intelligence there, a whole bunch of countries. Not the way they're pretending. Mark Boylette, excuse me, he sought me out to plant evidence on my street. I never tried to contact him. He has roles with people from Korea, with the intelligence community, and people from Russia, and people from other countries, and Ukraine with Hartford Hospital involved with wire, mail, crime acts, and methods. And roles of predicate acts on my street, but that are also increasingly people involved with predicate acts that turn intercities with the campuses, and the roles with the intelligence families next to them. They have roles of predicate acts with facts, and then changing, faking what they say, where they have recorded roles, collusions. There's a guy that looked just like James Comey, even if it wasn't him. The New Britain Superior Court was recorded since before the World Trade Center attack, and every year since, collusion / S, with a whole bunch of predicate acts with facts and methods of them. And then further hyper, additionally, with names next to and conjunctive to the Wethersfield Judicial Branch offices and the corrections offices. And increasingly, a whole bunch of people with them, collusion / S, with the educators of the same house, further with the extended family members, further that had roles with the principal child abuser. I recorded them collusions with first, enforcing that by hiding, changing, faking what's actually recorded with that, including their uses of the corner of the street through time. It has something to do, I have nothing to do with them. I never saw them at a corner of the street. And I was only driving by when it was years after Tim O'Brien, and he reportedly moved out of their house. But he was walking on that street on Highcrest of the principal child abuser, right at the corner, and the father of a Rick Cianfaglione was running. Like someone had timed me, they told me I was going to be there at that corner, driving. These are people intercities next to Central Connecticut State University, Covington Street, and the leasing agents involved with a bunch of people within the Britain Superior Court have been planting evidences in intercities of people on my street and people tied to them. But that's also faked for them. And then they say, they're because he's using people's names. They won't get on paper one name in sequence. I've been asking Judge Napolitano, they hid this from him. There are proofs. And increasingly, there's a Mike DeMay who has collusions with people on Hangdog Lane and conjunctive to it with a former mayor, Gold, with some religious themed. And as people I never saw on my street, like a Mendez police and a DeMay family, is involved collusion. A Mendez police officer attached me a fake conversation with him at the police station. I never had a conversation with him in my life. And he made my Saudi ex collusions with them with that. It's also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed with people on Valleycrest Street and Weathersfield and their roles with with those families on that street tied to it tomorrow and conjunctions to it who have roles on Walker Hill Road with intelligence families too. Like I named, one's named Fazina, a Fianza, or no, those are two other ones involved with the judicial branch office. People named Fianza and Fazina and their neighbors have roles with some untimely deaths and uses of murders and body dumping spots years apart, where they have time collusions with Facebook, also with the Britain Superior Court with murderers recorded intercities and confessions and people involved with the probation officers and involved in journalists. There are journalists tied to a Perón family. I never saw them on my campus in my life. They have roles of people that were with the intelligence families, foreign and domestic, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and religious nutbags. People with the Department of Transportation, Department of Motor Vehicle, and putting fake things in databases with child abusers, leaders, and kids, identity theft, fraud, slanders. They have a bunch of people at Central Connecticut State University, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with them with former Mayor Gold and planting evidences with these people at the side entrances to parks and along their roads along Hangdog Lane and two-route highway conjunctions to it and to that. A whole bunch of people sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. They have roles of predicate acts and predicate acts methods per a method. And they brought themselves into this. And they're lying about the sequences as ones that are increasingly involved with the Weathersfield police, attached me to fake conversations with themselves and being at the police station and speaking with them as a kid and now as an adult. And these are the same ones that were involved with the World Trade Center attack and with the other countries, our campuses roles with them. Increasingly, it's names that next to Hartford Hospital, those families and people tied to them, with the houses and businesses there too. They have roles, time collusion with overt criminal enterprise, private one, not the way they pretend, with the foreign and domestic. Because you guys, in other words, they came through sick campuses too. Watch what I caught them doing with the names. Harris family is also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with the houses next to the campuses with drugs and medicine crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders with their kids and adults with identity theft, fraud, slanders. Kevin Harris has roles with a Rick Sam Faglione, with a Brian Silver, and people along the intercities with them with federal evidences crimes and with child abusers, identity theft, fraud, slanders, and with judges and prosecutors involved with more child abusers, leaders of kids, and abuses of those kids, of the leaders of the kids. And the differences is what is exploited too. There's collusions with uses of that too. Otherwise, that body is sensed and it is adapted to, including if it's a majority of people, including if it is everyone. Countries A through Z's names have been syntax, use/s. Tactical ulterior from what can be defended, tactical ulterior from how nature needs us to use our difference /s and names. There are proofs that pantheism in yin yang, for example, exceptions, pantheism valued exceptions to be and to stay being led by the hyper invisible but still discernible that no one could fathom. Anyone would turn against nature to self-value roles being syntax and systems tactile terror from what nature communicates with positive and negative. And with the names of the sciences. Therefore, of the names of the people of the sciences, they are abridged. Forgiveness / non-forgiveness. We're supposed to understand, like where there are a lot of shootings. Too, there are proofs that there are a lot of shootings in Hartford tied to the reports of a shooting off one of the roads conjunctive to two-route highway, which is increasingly collusions with people with untimely deaths, and the Britain Superior Court with different kinds of drugs and untimely deaths, time use / S collusion. Brian Bonin sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. He has collusions with his neighbors, with federal evidences crimes, and with the police that hid what I recorded when I was a kid. And these are also courts, but they did way worse than that. Recorded too. They recorded themselves with some black KKK themed, Confederate flag themed, interreligious themed nutbags. Recorded that way. They can't afford to have what's discerned on Facebook. They have companies pretending sense and sensibilities related to what people say online, even when honestly they're missing how the communications are distinct from what is said, and people are confirming things where there are when people lie to people, there are proofs of it, but they confirm things. But then they will hell with that and they jump into issues dishonestly. They're leaving out what's actually recorded. There has not been one, even when they have the proper outcomes in cases. This breaching method has all sides of criminal and civil cases. In the interbranch, in the intelligence, foreign and domestic, never stop being shared. Tactical error from how nature has us grouped, when it's also positive onto and as itself. We have space means that come out of nowhere when the whole species body takes the whole species, the same planet at the same time. The best way to make a limitation on threats, weapons threats, and impositions is by getting the whole species plan. The whole species that doesn't have nuclear weapons and the ones that have nuclear weapons, helping the ones that have nuclear weapons to keep it contained, not just contained, but to get us off the fake value nature systems that make and keep whole locations, areas, and states relying upon food and water through an S systems tactical terror. It's going to cause negative value nature progression act nature showing that the whole ocean is polluted. We had all this means our founders would be flipping out in their graves. And their kin, the Native Americans, A through Z. And the kin of James Madison. Well, I don't know anything about them. I'm just saying, in other words, I know that. I know James Madison had declassified stuff that's replaced. We're not supposed to discern. We're supposed to discern and to appreciate and explain and understand the difference between what was said in those contexts and what was actually communicated about them. Our founders left us to understand how and why. They knew that people would pretend other than our founder, other than James Madison alone was our founder. Because you guys have been, since you were kids, you had short words replaced for nature. And for what it would have been proper syntax for the names of the people, the sciences. Black people. So I'll see the whites of eyes. Now I have to go find out who what the colonel's name was. As many of us do. But you guys can't even be honest. Because you were lied to when you were kids about James Madison's plan. Or you wouldn't think at all it was debatable. James Madison's plan forced everyone. In other words, maybe it was just because they really had no ammunition, so he said that. But there are proofs that they made a colonel say that, so they could leave record for that one thing that every American seems to know. And we know what's actually recorded. The breaching method shows them. In other words, even the smartest people fell for it. Even Judge Napolitano, pretending that there was a constitutional convention, Declaration of Independence, that was anything but extorted and counter-extorted. While fact-cheating nature and therefore physically tortured and enslaved. Because once, in other words, we have been systems tactically ulterior than the human species body of individual bodies on a bridge to communications by nature. We could bridge those communications, but it demonstrates to us. But we have been, and we are being, forbid the free speech for that. This breaching method shows you guys you need to hide roles. There are proofs that also the networks fake these things as collusions to hide this from you. Judge Napolitano, if you hear this. Fox News, please follow mandated law for CBS too. And CBS, these are people next to Fox Connecticut News that are also next to you, involved with multiple, with victims advocates, with child abusers, leaders of kids, and overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and roles with organized crime methods recorded at and next to campuses and corners of streets. These are not legitimate roles with all those different countries and the people that are and the people in leadership tied to a Violet family and a Leahy family and their campuses, their educators are also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with people involved with that involved with wire crime action methods, falsified police reports, collusions, and then further hyper additionally with the corrections offices and with the state judicial branch offices, and further with the campuses. And this is also only stated because they're they're showing people they need to hide how they've been planting illusions so others can record fake things. As one still involved with the campuses that were involved criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. Wouldn't have to speak it that way if they followed mandated law. Get me off the fake conversations and hide with their hiding. Further, with the principal child abuser, I caught them doing worse with and more involved then and now, and next to the campuses, planting evidences also with people from other areas. And with the intercampuses, they're using the differences of their roles of predicate acts at this campus or that campus and at location. These are people already had collusion with all natures of things, even things that were interbranch, where they had collusions with the crime scenes, also with other countries, other than countries A through Z, with the countries A individually grouped together. A whole bunch of different countries, people from Korea, Russia, Ukraine, involved with this Mark Violet and a Justa Klavinskis with intelligence families that planted evidence on my street years ago, a whole bunch of people tied to them, involved with home break-ins years apart, and with some fire departments, and people further with interbranch switching names and refusing to get on paper, further involved with people with violence and threats, credible threats of violence, recorded, and them recorded using methods to pretend others recorded to hide that and to pretend other in backgrounds with the same people involved. Has something to do with their roles with the Wethersfield town offices too, with the same ones involved. And in other words, get them on paper, one name in sequence. There are proofs that they're attacking the kids with religious types. And at the same time with overt criminal enterprise, private ones, and the intercultural, and then so they can pretend people are prejudiced. These are criminally foreign influence uses of location/s by some industries that are criminally foreign influence more than others, like psychiatry. I'm not even a doctor. They're criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions rot in our faces. Get them the heck on paper. Nah.